What if I can't keep up this version of myself anymore? What if we go through all that vulnerability and it is still met with silence, right? Love is for the people that don't have it all figured out. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to Spero Day. I decided to move my video sermons right back here into our sanctuary. And if you're new with us, my name is David Moses Perez, and I'm the minister of this amazing church in Nashville, Tennessee called Spero Day. You know, there's this amazing shift that's happening in Christian spirituality in the United States and the West. And our church, Spero Day, is on the forefront of that. There's other churches as well. There's not many of us. But Spero Day is actually on the forefront of that. So I just want to welcome you. Well, I have been in this series called Sacred Becoming, and today I want to talk to you about a love that we push away. You know, in our human experience, at least for me, I think we tend to push away three things. One is our need to be seen. You know, not just noticed, not just acknowledged, but, you know, truly be seen in all our contradictions, all the places we feel unfinished or uncertain or exposed, right? We want to be seen. We long for it. And not just the polished parts, but the whole of who we are. Yet there is something in us that resists that kind of visibility, and I get it, because what if I risk that and I'm rejected? There's a second thing that's hard for us to admit, and that's the need to belong, not just included, not just fit in, but to be known, right, for who we are, just known, not to have to perform for your approval, but just to be known. I don't have to produce. I can just present myself as I exist. And yet belonging does something, right? It asks us, if you want to belong, you're going to have to drop your masks that maybe you've spent time constructing. But what if we go through all that vulnerability and it is still met with silence, right? Then there's a third thing we struggle to admit, and it's just how exhausting it is to curate this version of ourselves that everybody sees, that hopefully everybody will approve of. It's this exhaustion of carrying the weight of holding it all together. And then there's this fear. What if I can't keep up this version of myself anymore? So what if we could stop pushing that away? What if we could go, I want to be seen, I want to belong, and I want to let go of this exhaustion? You know, I think there's a illustration from Christ's life that gives a very visual illustration of how we can push away these three things, maybe how we could not do it. And so let me show you this. Let me set this scene up for you. Jesus is on the move. He's traveling, he's teaching, he's healing, he's doing all this. He's also making some very important people very uncomfortable. And he's traveling somewhere between Galilee and Jerusalem, but he's getting closer to Jerusalem. And then right in the middle of that, this happens. At that time, some Pharisees approached Jesus and said, "Go, get away from here, because Herod wants to kill you." So Jesus said to them, "Go tell that fox." Now let's just stop right there, because this is no small thing. It's kind of a whoa. Now, first, who's Herod in this story? Well, he's the Jewish ruler of occupied Israel, right? But technically, he's really a puppet king by Rome, and he governs that area kind of as Rome's bidding. Now, this Herod had a father named Herod the Great, and that Herod, his father, Jesus has some history with the father, because the father tried to kill Jesus when Jesus was a baby. Now, this son Herod, he inherited his father's savvy, but also his paranoia. This son, Herod, Jesus also has some history with, because this guy in this story also killed Jesus's cousin, John the Baptist. So when they turn to him and go, you better get out of here, that is a real threat. But Jesus goes, you go tell that fox. And so I know it's no big deal to us, calling somebody a fox. But in first century, then it was a big deal. To call somebody a fox was, you called them, it was like saying they're devious, but you're also saying, you're not very significant. You're not very important to me. And so he goes, go tell that fox, look, I'm ministering to people today and tomorrow, and on the third day, I'm going to complete my work. However, it's necessary for me to travel today, tomorrow, and the next day, because it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside Jerusalem. Now that's interesting. You see, Jerusalem as a city, it's the very city that has a long history of rejecting their prophets, the spiritual voices that come to them. And Jesus also knows it's the place where he's going to face his confrontation, his suffering, his death. But then Jesus shifts from this resistance to this incredible heart-wrenching compassion. And then he says this, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those who were sent to you, how often I wanted to gather your people, just as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you didn't want that. Look, your house is abandoned. I tell you, you won't see me until the time comes when you say, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. So here, Christ's lament over this, it's just packed with feeling. For sure, Jesus has piercing clarity to them about the consequences of their deep resistance, but then he has personal grief, deep sorrow over it. You see, Jerusalem, it's the heart of Jewish religious and political life, which Jesus was part of, which Jesus loved. So by saying, you killed the prophets and stoned those who sent you, I don't see it as Jesus just condemning the past. He's actually bringing forth a tragic pattern of their resistance, that they resist those who speak truth to power. So what do these ancient words mean for us now? Well, if you just take them literally, as a critique of Jerusalem's past, you're going to miss something deep here, something that is unveiling something about our human resistance when it comes to love and the love we push away. And so it's like, why do we reject those who challenge us to a greater fear, a greater view? Why do we turn away voices that call us to a deeper truth and understanding, a deeper transformation? Well, part of it is it's terrifying, right? We fear losing something that's familiar with us. It's a risk to step out into something unknown. But man, this image, this feminine image of a mother hen gathering her chicks, it really has a startling tenderness, and it paints a picture of a God, a feminine picture, which is important, who aches, who holds. And not because they didn't need it. It's because it was outside their own systems of power. They couldn't see it. And the abandoned house he talked of, the temple, sure. But for us, what does it mean? The temple of our inner life. But yet, even in this lament where Jesus said, you're not going to see me again until I come again, that's a question is, will we continue to push away these three things we need, or will we allow ourselves to be gathered up? So let's go back to this first one, right? This risk of being seen. I don't know about you, but I have spent a fair amount of my life managing my image, right? Not trying to cover up because of some phoniness or some ill agenda. It's because it's scary, right? We hide parts of ourselves that we fear will be unacceptable, and we present parts of ourselves where we go, okay, this is acceptable, this is likable. And yet, if we're deeply honest, there is this deep ache to be known. We don't want to curate these versions of ourselves. We want to be able to show we're unfinished, we're complicated, the real person underneath. And so this is where the tension lives, right? We long and ache to be seen, but we fear it. I mean, what if we reveal ourselves and it's met with silence? And then that truth is just too much, right? So then it's easier to hide behind our competence, our humor, our charm, whatever armor we've learned to wear. But deep down, if there's no connection without authenticity, right? And so this is why Jesus' words hit us, with a waking up. I mean, Jesus is utterly heartbroken here, where he says, how often I've wanted to gather you, just as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you didn't want that. This is complete and utter vulnerability he is showing us. This isn't the Jesus flipping the tables or feeding the thousands, doing miracles. This is a Jesus who aches with love. This is a Jesus who understands rejection, the kind of rejection that many of us fear. That if we let ourselves be seen, will I really be wanted? But I think here's what's stunning. Jesus wants them anyway, even if they push it away. And that's the kind of love I imagine. And it's the kind of love I experience. I don't have to put together my perfect self. I love what C.S. Lewis once wrote. To love it all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. Isn't that right? I think that's right. And when you know C.S. Lewis's story, you go, oh man, he experienced that. You see, to really love is to be open. And yes, it does mean we might be rejected. But what's the alternative, right? To stay hidden, to never be fully known, to live our lives slightly apart from the love that we were actually made for? And listen, you've heard all the research, you've read the studies that show when we're authentic in relationships, this is what bolsters up our well-being, right? The more we allow ourselves to be seen, and not just the good parts, but the real parts, the unfinished parts, all the studies show that's when you experience real belonging. And isn't that the core of Christ's message? Love is greater than fear. Our worth is not something we have to curate or control. I love the verse in 1 John where it says, There's no fear in love, but perfect love, when love is healthy, drives out fear. Because love gathers, fear isolates. So what would happen if we allowed ourselves to be seen, right? This real deep seen. I think that kind of love would shape us. And I do think there are some even small risks we can take. Of course, with safe people, choose safe people. I'm not asking you to go to open mic night, but safe people who care about you. When they ask how you're doing, you really tell them. You share a part of your story that you're kind of tempted to keep hidden, even if it presents you as unfinished. You go there and you stop pretending you got it all under control. Even if it feels uncomfortable, you just step into that space. You don't have to be the strong one or look for the fix. And I know these are small things, but they really are sacred when we can make room for that kind of connection that doesn't demand perfection, but just our presence. Something happens. Now, do you remember that second thing we fear admitting, that we ache to belong? I don't think we talk about belonging enough. Well, we're afraid to talk about it. Belonging is like the air. It's not something we think about often, but man, when you don't have it, you feel it. And when you feel like you belong, you feel whole. When you don't feel like you belong, you feel untethered. So belonging, it means we have to open ourselves up. Yes, it means we got to risk who we really are. And I get it. That is terrifying. And I get that belonging is not always safe. Some of us have learned this the hard way, right? We stepped towards a person or towards a group of people in vulnerability, and we were met with some sort of indifference or rejection. I get that that's fearful, and so some of us step back and go, I'm going to go and be self-sufficient. I'm not going to risk that kind of heartbreak. So the fear is real. I don't want to be dismissive of that. But Jesus stands outside of Jerusalem. He's not casting judgment. It's someone who knows the deep pain of rejection himself, and he looks at this city that he knows and loves, a city that should have known him, a city that should have been home to him, and his heart just breaks. And he says, look, your house is abandoned. I tell you, you won't see me until the time comes again when you say, blessings on the one who comes in the Lord's name. So what happens if we resist resisting that? For me, Jerusalem is just not the seat of their political and religious turmoil. It's what happens when we resist belonging, when we resist allowing ourselves to be gathered in that kind of love. And look what Jesus says. Man, he is crying out for longing. He's someone who knows rejection firsthand. Those words, right? How often I wanted to gather you, just as a hen gathers her chicks. And then he says this with such feeling, but you didn't want that. And so Jesus' reaction here, it's not angry. It's longing. It's wanting. Jesus isn't just tolerating our humanness. He's saying, I want it. I want to be near you, and I want us to belong. But yes, that kind of allowing ourselves to be gathered, sure, it's a different kind of trusting. And I know that kind of trust is a risk, But again, I come back to the research that our hearts confirmed. That yes, when we've experienced rejection, of course, often we respond by withdrawing further. Some of us then reject new opportunities to connect when they present themselves. But here's what the research shows. Those that can push beyond that and risk connection, go for it, well, their well-being rises, their resilience rises, their purpose and meaning rises. So belonging is not just something we want, it's something we need. It shapes our mental, our emotional, our spiritual health. So when you think back to that, what C.S. Lewis wrote, right? To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. Jesus knows that kind of vulnerability. You know, our tradition, it holds up a God who refuses to love at a distance, a God who offers that wanting and that ache even when we resist it. So maybe the question isn't just, do I want to belong, but will I risk it? Can I trust that I already do belong? And if Jesus' words reveal anything to us now, it's that it's not about a transaction kind of spirituality. It's really kind of a inner homecoming. Now, this ache, there are some things we can do to tend to it, right? This ache to belong. So let yourself show up. Not who you think people need you to be. Take some small risks and vulnerability, right? Share your story, share your fears, share your questions, your doubts. Present yourself as is, not perform yourself. And most of all, I hope this for you. Stop convincing yourself that belonging is something you have to earn. You don't have to earn it. Okay, finally, this last thing we fear admitting, this curating an image of ourselves that we got it all together. That takes so much exhaustion. And this fear that, oh man, if I surrender to that, everything will fall apart, right? Somehow we become experts at control. And it's not because we're power hungry, hardly. It's because letting go, if I let that go, it's like a free fall. But here in Luke, I see Jesus, creating this image for us, this mother hen that is tender. He doesn't describe God as a judge or authority, but a very feminine mother hen who just shows care and love. And Jesus just grieves, right? I wanted to gather you, but you didn't want that. Man, surrendering that kind of control, I get it. It's fearful. And it's hard to admit that we can't hold it together. But when we cling to that kind of control, we miss the vulnerability that, grows our life. Psychologists call this psychological flexibility. It's this ability to let go of rigid control and say yes to uncertainty. And when you're able to do that, again, all the studies show that your resilience grows, your esteem, your well-being grows, and gripping that tightly continually, it's just exhausting. So it's not passive. Letting go is not passive. And letting go is not a weakness. It's allowing ourselves to be gathered up towards something bigger, really something beyond our own strength. It's no longer pushing that away. So let me finally say this to you. It's really the risk of wanting to be found. Listen, I know our humanness is complicated. It's wonderful. But it's complicated, and we ache, right? We long to belong, but then we keep our distance. We crave rest, but we keep curating this image that we got it all together, right? And yet, through all of this, through our guarded hearts, through our fear of rejection, through our clenched fists that refuse to let go, the God I hold on to is a God who stands before us with this longing voice. Oh man, how many times I wanted to gather you up, but you pushed it away. And it's not, hey, how many times I wanted to judge you, how many times I wanted to fix you. No. How many times I wanted you. I wanted to gather you up. And so for me, this really is the heart of God, a love that doesn't force, a love that doesn't demand, a love that doesn't need to coerce, a love that just longs. But are we going to keep resisting, pushing away the kind of love we need? Are we going to choose what seems easier to manage in order to protect ourselves and miss being fully known? But here's the thing. Love is for the people that don't have it all figured out. Love is for the people who are willing to be found. So maybe today is the day a part of you stops resisting. Maybe today is a day that you can admit, I want to be seen fully without filters. Maybe today is the day you own, I want to belong. Not because I'm useful or impressive, because I'm human, because I'm me. And maybe this is the day you go, look, I don't have to hold it all together. So let's say yes to being seen. Let's say yes to being wanted. And let's say yes to allowing ourselves to being gathered up in that kind of love. So may you, as you go from here, may you take those risks. May you allow yourself to be seen, to belong. May you allow all the plates to fall. And may God bring you safe people where you can just be you. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. And peace. I'll see you next week.